So going back to that, when you created it, in some ways it's a little bit like a gig. In the format it's like a gig, but the one big difference was the earphones. It was a sort of silent disco type effect in that we wore headphones while we were listening to you. At what point did that come in? Because that seemed to very much suit the music that you do. It added an intimacy to the experience. Was that an important part of when you were designing it, to give it this, well, technological flash really, but it certainly worked?
Well, that was Bal's idea for
It was my
the
fault.
silent.
Really good idea.
Yeah.
So he made it really complicated.
It was pretty early. It was pretty early on. We had the idea that it was going to be a silent gig. That was what almost. Originally, we had an idea that it was going to be like a silent disco that people would come into, and you'd hear the sound, and then it was little scenes would happen inside the disco. But then that kind of gradually morphed. We're going to have the band in it as well. And it gradually morphed into just being more like a silent gig. But the idea of having two headphones was pretty early on. And
so Bal was sort of thinking about that side of things, and I just had sort of images. I was like, right, I arrive on stage, I get flung into a spotlight and a sack, and I crawl out the sack with a ukulele, and I start playing this song. You know, so I was sort of thinking about it just like images like that. And Bal was thinking about the technical side of things, which is quite often how we work. Like when we shot DIY, which is one of our music videos, which has been quite popular, Bal thought about the method of doing it, which was still photographs, a story told. And I was like, I just want to be the woman out of Weird Science. So I'll be like a fembot. So it's kind of like...
but sometimes the technical side of things does... It's good to have that idea quite early on, then it does dictate. For example, you're saying about the music, that totally dictated stuff like, well, we had to have like an electronic drum kit because a real drum kit wouldn't work properly through the thing, so it had to be that. So that also then influenced the stuff, because you're using electronic drum sounds that you couldn't use otherwise. That kind of dictated what type of music it was going to be, and it had to be synth, and it had to be, you couldn't have had like a live piano really. It had to be like real. The electronic instruments mostly.
But I mean, you could do Biden Time remix unplugged. It's just a ukulele and a guitar.
It would be quite different.
But mouth trumpet.
Was the trumpet okay in it as well? If you this sort of electronic bias?
Yeah, that was obviously that was kind of like the one really loud acoustic instrument that kind of.
Because I do remember there being a moment where it was someone suggested in the higher echelons of the record company that they got rid of you out of the band. I seem to remember that being a scene.
Yeah, I wasn't pleased.
That's why you get shot.
That's right.
Now, this was based on your own experiences. How much of it was directly from what you experienced when you were with a big company?
A lot of it was. I mean, that's what Ben said. You know, he really loved working with us because I had really amazing recall, and because, like, you know, I've always been a mimic, and you know, working for Mischief I'd just go into all these different characters. So he was like, just write that down, you know.
Yeah.
So, but then that became more and more fantastical because of the sort of the universe that it was set in. So I mean, we were working on it. We're like, oh, this just sounds like a big mess, but somehow it sort of came together and people got it. So.
There were so many different levels to it. I think one level it was about what happens to bands and the music industry and how it takes them, and particularly noticeable the one moment where you mime when they're trying to shove you into a certain role. And I think it was just after that they were trying to get rid of you as well.
That's right.
So it's that idea of we take the band and we make them into something else. Rather like an abusive relationship where you take someone and then just try and change them. It's that sort of destruction of intimacy, I feel. And then there was other things about what the impact was sort of environmentally for you as well. There was quite a lot of conversation about that, and but the big question about keeping your identity and the idea of waiting as well, that came up quite a lot, that sense of what's going to happen and being at someone else's beck and call, which I think regardless of what you do, whether it's working in a call centre or being in a band or writing as a critic or waiting for that interview to finally call you back, everyone knows it and everyone knows that pain, so it has that universal reach. It's not just you indulging yourselves like Nazareth in the double album in 1977.
Well, I mean, that's
what's wrong with that?
no disrespect to them, but
that has its place. No, I think we were a bit worried about that. That it would just only speak to people. You know, I mean, it was just it was solely about like our experience, because we were signed to Sony in the late '90s, and it was kind of about that kind of major record label thing. But I think, you know, we were sort of thinking that hopefully it would speak, you know, have a slightly broader appeal than just people who'd been signed to Sony in the late 90s, because quite a small audience really.
But also, like, you know, working, because we do a lot of work in schools with like songwriting projects and music, and you know, you speak to a lot of the young people, and they're so obsessed with this X Factor thing, and you know, nobody sort of gets to look behind the curtain, you know, and see the Wizard of Oz sitting behind it, which is a pretty kind of grubby thing, you know, so it was quite good to sort of look at it that way as well.
Well, Rick Waller, who was one of the big names of the early X Factor generation, currently works marking exams.
Is that right?
That's what he does now, and he actually says the worst thing is going to the job centre and everyone looks and says, what a failure. So there's the other side of that sort of pain, and the stories that you hear about what the effect's been on Susan Boyle is pretty horrible, really. So I think the dark side of X Factor will come out, and a story like Biding Time Remix does that. It brings it out. But you stayed together as a band, though. It didn't destroy you.
Well, I mean, it was Bal and myself were in that band, that lineup of the band. It was another band. I mean, we were called Hard Body after the Bret Easton Ellis novel, and American Psycho. And basically, there was another 2 players. One who's in Belle and Sebastian now, so he done all right. And then, actually, there was 2 more after that. We had a friend that just invited himself into the band as well.
Once the label with the picture, I was, I'm a member now.
I'm a member too.
But I mean, we were so naive, you know, and but it was like quite a good experience as well. We got to like go to New Orleans and you know, record an album and stuff. But it's pretty mad when you look at the music industry. It's the only one that has like a 98% fail rate. So, you know, you're getting signed for this big mega contract and you're like, you feel like you've won the lottery, but you know, you've not really. And
you just had a loan from the mafia.
And then and then you're in meetings with like 20 stylists talking about what type of trainers you're going to wear, and doing photo shoots with Rankin and getting driven about in a limousine.
Yeah, I'm sure that probably wouldn't happen now, because obviously the music industry is in a slightly kind of perilous situation now.
We probably caught it just before.
Well, perilous situation, rather like Cyprus, but we won't go into that just now. Robert?
No, I don't want to depress everyone.
Well, moving away from Biding Time, you also did have an album out last year as well, so you're still being a proper normal band as well. It is important to you to hold on to that side of your practice.
Yeah, because I think we sort of just get a bit bored of...
Oh, we're rehearsing tomorrow, aren't we?
We're playing a gig next week.
We're playing a gig, but we're even sort of talking about introducing theatrical stuff
where's the gig?
It's at Stereo for Threads of Sound, who are a live record label.
That's right, it's being recorded, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's right, yeah.
It's been filmed live, so we're going to attempt to play the whole of Red Light Means Go.
No, it's still important. I mean, obviously Louise keeps writing songs, so it's kind of like every time we've got a bunch of songs, I think, well, let's record them, let's get them down. So it is quite important to, otherwise I don't know, you get creative constipation.
I think that may be a good note to it. Although I did just before you came out with that image, I had the image of you writing a song and thinking, I've got to get the band back together and the various, but when you're there with the improvisers and everyone back in, a wonderful image, and I think there's a film in that, so you can get perhaps Hollywood. Waste your time this time.
The A-Team.
That's it,
Well, thank you very much for talking today. It's been a real pleasure, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Gareth. Yes.